Three brothers who used to be the hottest thing in the real estate world, selling to the rich and famous of New York and Miami, are now convicts, sex traffickers, according to a federal jury. But did the jury get it wrong about the Alexander brothers? Their supporters and some of the brightest minds in the legal world say yes. This is Uncovered. After a 5-week trial, a federal jury in Manhattan has found identical twins, Alon and Oren Alexander, and their older brother, Tal Alexander, guilty of sex trafficking women 10 to 15 years ago. It's when the men were in their 20s. They were at the top of the real estate game, making a ton of money and partying hard. They were hosting parties at luxury mansions in the Hamptons and at nightclubs in Aspen and at celebrities' homes in New York City. And of course, they would invite women and women's friends to come and party. 11 women testified at trial that they were assaulted by one or more of the brothers during these parties. Some of them say they believed they were drugged. The jury heard from a woman who says she was 17 years old when she was raped by Oren Alexander, who recorded it. The jury saw that video, which showed Oren Alexander having sex with the woman's lifeless body. From the defense's perspective, not one woman involved in the federal case, the women who testified at trial, or the dozens of women who prosecutors spoke with, filed a police report or had a medical record related to being sexually assaulted by one or more of the men. No woman filed a criminal complaint alleging sexual assault against any of the brothers until a woman filed a civil complaint in March 2024. That's when the complaints and civil lawsuits started flooding in. That's also when prosecutors began building their case. And 9 months later, in December of 2024, the brothers were arrested. Of course, their attorneys call all this into question. The brothers, now husbands and fathers, are facing life in prison. Juda Engelmayer is the media representative for the brothers and their family. Juda, bring me through the men's reaction to the verdict. They were found guilty, each of them, on all 10 charges.
They are still emotionally dealing with this. They're trying to grasp with the idea of, at least in the near future, they're stuck at MDC. And beyond that, July, August, whenever it might be, they'll be sent to a max of security. I mean, this is trafficking. They'll get sent to max of security. They're going to be sent with killers and rapists and thugs and drug dealers and things like that. That's what they're going to be in prison with. And that's scary for them. On top of that, they're worrying about their families, their wives, their kids. Nobody wants to be an absentee father like that and have your kids grow up visiting you behind the glass wall. But at the same time, they're trying to keep their heads level and trying to focus on the road ahead and prepare themselves for the appeal, prepare themselves for whatever motions they have to file.
So they're considering an appeal for many reasons, I'm sure. What are some of those reasons?
The verdict itself was very surprising at how uniform it was. It didn't look like there was any thought put into the various different charges and who did what. They just I think they lumped them all into a category of these are all just bad guys.
Explain what happened with Juror 6 and Juror 11.
Juror number 11. She's the one who wrote a letter to the judge early on and said that juror number 6, she believed, didn't think that the boys were guilty and he wasn't going to vote to convict. And that was not even halfway through. That was by halfway through the trial.
So the judge decided to remove Juror 6 and keep Juror 11.
We argued that should have been a mistrial right there because they were clearly talking about the verdict beforehand. The judge ruled that she didn't think it poisoned the jury pool at all, or it didn't taint the jury pool at all, and it just affected one person. Then there were issues with the court's rulings and decisions. We weren't allowed to put up a defense. We couldn't put up anybody who would speak about, even Danielle Epstein, who was there. She was a former girlfriend of Alon who was at the party in question, at one of the parties in question, and she wasn't allowed to she wasn't allowed to testify about a handful of things which would have been pertinent for the jury to hear about where Alon might have been that night and what he might have been doing other than assaulting people. But the judge gave a very small window of what she can talk about. It's almost bizarre that the prosecution, the onus is on them, the burden is on them, but the judge gave them a wide berth of propensity witnesses, of evidence, evidentiary rulings, and the witness testimony, and the ability to use certain things, the ability to use documentation, texts, videos, and things like that. And we weren't able to. The judge kept on denying. I hear you, denied. I hear you, denied. Are you doing this again? Denied. And anything that the prosecution wanted that was damning got put in. Anything that we wanted that was exculpatory or possibly exculpatory was not allowed.
The Southern District of New York, which prosecuted the case, said the jury's verdict is an important step in fighting sex trafficking. They said in a statement, "Federal sex offenses are all too prevalent in our society and all too often go unreported and unpunished. The truth is sex trafficking and other federal sex offenses are present in many walks of life, and we have not done enough to root it out. This verdict cannot undo the effects of heinous abuse the Alexanders' many victims endured, but it does send a message. New Yorkers want to bring an end to sex trafficking in all our communities." Let's talk for a second about the Federal Trafficking Victims Protection Act. It's the same law that was in play during P. Diddy's case. And in fact, the same lawyers who represented Diddy were then hired by the Alexander brothers to work for them because clearly these attorneys know what they're doing. Diddy was found not guilty of sex trafficking. People can be charged under this law if they use force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of commercial sex. That means sex in exchange for money or goods.
The Trafficking Victims Protection Act, TVPA, was designed by Congress primarily to target Eastern European gangs and South American drug cartels who traffic people for both servitude as well as sex. And the commercial statute applies for that because they're doing it to make money. In this case, the judge didn't say you had to prove any of that. The judge said that all you had to show was that there was commerce and a sex act, which meant commerce, and it was laid out. Even a train ticket, $35 train ticket to the Hamptons on Long Island Railroad was, on the Hamptons Jitney is commerce. Commerce used for sex. You buy them a hotel room, you buy them a flight, buy them dinner, get them a Hampton Jitney ride, and that is commerce. You're potentially opening up litigation to anybody who takes a woman out for dinner, buys them goes on vacation with them, and then they get into a fight, a lover's quarrel. 2 years later, they break up, they're no longer with each other, and she could accuse them of trafficking, and it fits under the law now.
Well, of course, what the Alexander brothers did happened on a much larger scale, but I understand your point. And it's not just that. As we saw in this case, the judge said essentially, even by sending a text message to someone who then invites a friend, and that friend is then allegedly sexually assaulted, that technically is sex trafficking.
The judge said that they don't have to know who is coming. They don't have to know each other. But if the invitation was put out by one person and given to another, that still counts also as the inducement to travel. These are appellate issues, clearly, and they're issues that the Second Circuit is going to take up and look at. I think they'll look at it seriously because it does rewrite the trafficking laws rules, and it does open it does allow a broad net to catch a lot of people who probably shouldn't be caught in it.
And like we see in this case, people can be charged for things that they did 10 to 15 years ago. Look, I don't know the Alexander brothers personally, but I did meet their parents, their friends, and their wives during the trial. I can tell you there is a disconnect between what I hear about the brothers now and what they were convicted of doing.
They're not the same people as they were when in their 20s. They're a lot more introspective and a lot more grown up and adult and a lot more mature. And they're being held to a standard today for what they did yesterday, which I find to be problematic too. And that doesn't mean that I don't think that people should pay for their crimes if they committed a crime. But once again, I don't think they committed a crime, at least on the federal level with what they were charged of.
Thank you for speaking with us, Juda. There's a lot for people to learn from the Alexander brothers' case about how things we do years ago can come back and haunt us. But I also think it should raise a discussion about the federal sex trafficking law. We saw it used with P. Diddy, and now we're seeing it used with the Alexander brothers. Is the federal government using the sex trafficking law in a way it wasn't intended to be used? For more true crime stories with depth, accountability, and impact, subscribe to Us Weekly's YouTube channel or check out uncoveredwithkristinthorne.com.